Hello and welcome to the Gaggle where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, we're just recovering from all of the hot air that has been emitted into the ether from the European states, uh, expostulating on Trump's threat to simply take Greenland off Denmark's hands, and there's in violation of international law, international law, and but right now the latest wizard idea that is coming primarily from the UK, but other European states are involved in this. The latest idea is to start seizing ships in the high seas. They may be
You mean
Russian ships.
piracy? You mean piracy?
I mean piracy, yes, because they are under sanction. They've been sanctioned by the UK. They've been sanctioned by the EU,
With
and
no legal standing.
no legal standing. But that doesn't seem to stop these great advocates on behalf of international law. A few months ago, we had the whole tub thumping about that apparently seizing Russia's sovereign assets was entirely in accord with international law. There was no legal finding for this, other than Ursula von der Leyen's vivid imagination. But suddenly it just got repeated that apparently it's entirely in accord with international law to seize Russia's sovereign asset. That's been put in abeyance for a while, but it's still there as something to be
Well, and on
trotted
that point,
out at some point.
yeah, it's not. They know it's wrong. Okay, there's no doubt about that. Okay, it's the precedent and it's in the fallout that they're worried about. They're not concerned about doing something wrong. Okay,
Yes.
because
No,
they do things wrong all the time.
I agree. I
Okay,
agree.
okay, and there's no morality and there's no. It's just like, uh-oh, what happens next? That's what they're concerned
Yes.
about. Okay, that's all.
That's right. That's right. Now, in the case of the ships, you see what has triggered this sudden excitement about seizing ships in the high seas was the seizure last week of the Marinara, which was, of course, registered to Russia.
Well,
And
reflagged to
yeah, but it
Russia.
doesn't matter. At the
No,
time
I
it
mean,
was, yeah, but I'm just saying at the time that it was seized, it
right.
registered to Russia. So
But I do bring
the
up,
reason I emphasize that is that as we'll see with some of these stories, that everyone is very confused about this and are suggesting that somehow it's illegal to reflag a ship. It is not illegal. You can absolutely reflag a ship any number of times you want on one journey. On one journey you can reflag a ship. So that's I think it's very important to emphasize that there was no question that he wasn't flying under a flag. It was flying under a Russian flag.
George emphasized my point. Thank you.
Yes, exactly. That's all. But anyway, so here is the here is the BBC. Here's a story in the BBC. Um, they're saying, hey, headline: UK can legally stop shadow fleet tanker. Ministers believe. Well, as long as
Well, at least they
they
said
believe it,
believe.
well, as long as the ministers believe it, then I don't need any more legal opinions than that.
I still know people that believe in the tooth fairy. Continue, George.
Me too. And so here we have, the government has identified a legal basis which it believes can be used to allow UK military to board and detain vessels in so-called shadow fleets. This is the BBC News Understand. So I mean, you want to say something about this concept of the shadow fleet? Because we've talked about this before. This is entirely made up,
Yes.
completely made up by the Western powers, and the media just repeat this as if somehow this is some nefarious operation. They're engaged.
Well, yeah. I mean, we can see the transition even in the language here and the punctuation. Notice, George, you don't have quotation marks around Shadow Fleet anymore.
Right, that's right.
It's become real.
It's become real.
There's a transmigration
Right.
of
I
this
think
concept. It was so called, air quotes, and now it is real. I have made it real because
that's right.
my mind has
That's right.
made it real.
So it becomes real, and then once it becomes real, you just can keep repeating it because it's something real. It's something that, well, obviously it's now accepted that this is a shadow fleet and it's engaged in something illicit. But the point is, and this has to be emphasized, is UK law, EU law does not apply to non-UK and non-EU citizens or states. It doesn't matter what your
And
law
it
is. It doesn't apply to anyone who's not in the EU and not in the UK.
and it certainly doesn't apply to international waters.
It absolutely does not. So it says Russia, Iran, and Venezuela have all been accused of operating ships without a valid national flag to avoid sanctions on oil. Now, again, one has to say this, it's going to be very, very important to emphasize. Who says they're not valid? You're having no basis of saying that they're not valid, and as we'll see, even if you can say this is not a valid national flag, that still doesn't give you the right to seize a ship on the high seas. Even if you've got that, okay, this is not valid, you still don't have a right to seize the ship on the high seas. But in the case of the Marinara last week, it absolutely had a valid national flag and a valid registration.
And these sanctions, again, are unilaterally announced. They have no legal.
No,
I mean, look, they're looking. The government has identified a legal base. Okay, so here we go. Everybody here, this is how we build this. So this is all legally based. There's a legal basis. Okay, but in the next paragraph, what is val? What is the legal definition of valid?
right.
And these sanctions have no legal, there's
No,
no legal basis. I'll
no,
use the language for these sanctions.
that's right, and that's what's important because when you listen to all this talk, and particularly amidst this talk about how the U.S. had a legal right to seize President Maduro, it says, well, yeah, but he had been indicted by a U.S. court. Yeah, but a U.S. court has no jurisdiction in Venezuela. I mean, that's a U.S. court has jurisdiction in the U.S. The same with laws. Yeah, that's the UK law. UK law doesn't apply in Russia. UK law doesn't apply in Iran or Venezuela. It's a very basic point that people seem very confused. Apparently, you pass a law in one country and then it applies in every other country. Um, and um, and then it goes on. The Sanctions and Money Laundering Act from 2018. Oh, a piece of legislation from the UK, the Sanctions and Money Laundering Act from 2018. It doesn't apply to anyone other than outside the UK. I mean, it's like, okay, you passed this legislation. I'm thrilled for you. What's it got to do with any other country?
Well, um, it could set a precedent, and Russia can start doing the same thing. Iran
Right,
can start doing the
right,
same thing.
right.
They have navies, okay. So again, is this the precedent? The stealing of Russian sovereign assets. They couldn't. They invented a legal basis, but they were afraid of the outcome. They're going to come to the same conclusion here.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's probably true. Unless they get reckless, and then
Well,
just
unless they want to provoke a conflict. Okay.
exactly. There's a real possibility of that.
Well, I think that's our working assumption.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they've
I
come
mean,
this far.
the Balts they did the first test run,
Right,
okay,
right,
harassing Russian shipping,
right.
and Russia reacted, and they had to calibrate. We're going to see what these people, almost by definition for me, these people are grasping at straws. Okay, think about it, George. I have to come up with a legal basis to pickpocket you. I can, oh yeah, I worked it out legally. I can pickpocket you.
Right,
You see how the
right.
very beginning of they're looking,
A legal. Yeah,
conjuring up some kind of legal
that's right.
theory. I
Yeah,
mean, when you're there, you know you're in a bad place.
well, that's right. Oh, but it's always as we'll see. I mean, it's just fascinating how they come up with this, and the media they never push back, and they say, "What kind of nonsense is this?" I mean, you just simply invented international out of whole cloth. I mean, no one has ever accepted these premises. I mean, we've had centuries and centuries of navigation in the high seas.
There you go. There you go.
And no one
This
has ever
is the
understood the principle that you can just go ahead and seize ships on the high seas.
Just before George and I started here, we were talking about this, is that if you look at really the origin point, the ground zero of some of what we call international law today comes about how you deal with commerce on the high seas and international waters. And you know what? Large countries and small came across, yeah, if we all play by the rules here, it might be to all of our benefit. And you know what? That was the working consensus for
Right.
centuries.
That's right. That's right. Um, and then so it says the UK has already imposed sanctions on more than 500 alleged shadow vessels, which it believes are helping to fund hostile activity, including Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Well, who cares what you think is hostile activity? They're not engaged in anything hostile towards the United Kingdom. I mean, is Russia at war with the UK? Is it doing anything that to threaten the UK? No. So you define hostile activity, which is Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Well, that's got nothing to do with you. So therefore, the idea you just simply say, oh well, it's a hostile activity. Notice how they've also now shifted the argument. So first of all, they're talking about this. Oh, it's about they don't have the proper flag. You don't have they haven't done the proper paperwork. Oh, now suddenly we have to do something about it because they're engaged in hostile activity. So they keep shifting the argument, and the media just simply report this as if as if some kind of a solid claim is being made here.
Well, maybe Denmark should stop and board an American ship in the Baltic. By the Danes should do that because they are involved in the U.S. is involved in hostile
Right.
activity towards Greenland, huh?
I think they can
Well, I
certainly
mean,
try.
this is the. I mean, if this is your legal
Right.
theory, then why not?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Um, and then it says that the minister said that action taken by the UK and its allies has forced around 200 ships off the seas, most of which will have been operating without a legitimate flag. Who
Who's
says it's a legitimate that it's not a legitimate flag? How have you decided that it's not a legitimate flag? Have you really gone through all the paperwork, whether they're legitimately registered to the state that they claim they're registered to? Also, and as I said this before, even if that's the case, even if they're not, you still don't have a right to seize the ships. You can report it. You can report it to the International Maritime Organization. You don't have a right to steal the ship and arrest the people on board because they haven't done the proper paperwork. Um, and then it goes on. The government believes this new legal mechanism they have identified could be applied to any sanctioned vessels not legitimately flagged.
yeah, I mean, George, a ship can reflag as many times as
As
they want,
many times,
and
exactly.
that's accepted practice.
Exactly. And then it says Defense Secretary John Healey. That guy is
Oh,
as thick, thick
this
as
guy
two
is really
planks. I mean, you
obnoxious.
just look at his face. I mean, that is a one thick guy. Um, Defense Secretary John Healey said the actions are full compliance with international law, and so I know about international law. Adding that the UK will not stand by as malign activity increases on the high seas. What malign activity? I mean,
What,
how you define? You can engage in any malign activity on the high seas, other than something that's very specific, and we'll see actually in a minute what the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea actually says is malign activity. Healy told MPs on Wednesday that the government was stepping up action on the Shadow Fleet, developing further military options, and strengthening coordination with allies. Um, and and so here, I think this is here it is. Here is the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. And let's look at Article 92. It says, ships shall sail under the flag of one state only, and save in exceptional cases expressly provided for in international treaties or in this convention, shall be subject to its exclusive jurisdiction on the high sea. However, a ship may not change its flag during a voyage or while in a port of call, save in the case of a real transfer of ownership or change of registry. There it is. Yeah, you can change your flag if there's a transfer of ownership and a change of registry. So you can do it any number of times on one journey. That's there's no problem there. It says, oh, you may not change this flag, save in the case of a real transfer of ownership or a change of registry. So it's a change of registry. And in the case of the Marinara, there was a change of registry. That's it. It was perfectly legal.
Even change of name.
Change of name, exactly. But you can't the ship may which sails under the flags of two or more states may not claim any of the nationalities in question with respect to any other state. But all of that just says what does that mean? That means you can't claim to have the nationality of any of one state if you're flying under two flags. Where does it say that anybody has a right to take the law into your own hands and to start seizing ships because you don't think that they've done the proper paperwork?
Well, and on top of it, none of these ships are being seized, citing Article 92.
Right.
Okay.
That's right. And then here is Article 110. Notice what he's saying here. It's right of visit, not right of seizure, right of visit. And it says, except where acts of interference derive from powers conferred by treaty, a warship which encounters on the high seas a foreign ship other than a ship entitled to complete immunity, so it's diplomatic or something, and then is not justified in boarding it unless there is reasonable grounds for suspecting that. So what are the grounds? The ship is engaged in piracy. Okay, no basis of thinking that any of these shadow fleet are engaged in piracy. The ship is engaged in the slave trade, and there's no basis for that. The ship is engaged in unauthorized broadcasting, and the flag state of the warship has jurisdiction under Article 109. The ship is without nationality, or through flying a foreign flag or refusing to show its flag, the ship is in reality of the same nationality as the warship. In other words, it's basically the same nationality as the intervening ship. So you then it says you have a right to visit. Okay, so it's a ship is without nationality, so you have a right to visit, not a right to seize, right to visit. And then he says, in the case provided for, the warship may proceed to verify the ship's right to fly its flag. To this end, it may send a boat under the command of an officer to the suspected ship. If suspicion remains after the documents have been checked, it may proceed to a further examination on board the ship, which must be carried out with all possible consideration. If the suspicions prove to be unfounded, and provided that the ship boarded has not committed any act justifying them, it shall be compensated for any loss or damage that may have been sustained. So again, all it's saying here, you can board the ship, but you can't seize the ship, and you can't arrest the people on board the ship. So this is really what's so important. People have get this very confused here because they're just saying, "Oh, well, it's the business of the nationality." This first of all, they say it's without a nationality, or it's changed its nationality. You can change it anytime, any number of times you want. If you do find that it has no nationality, your only recourse, you can report it. You can report it to the state. Hey, this ship is claims that it is flying the flag of, I don't know, of Germany, but it's not registered to Germany, and they can report it to the German authorities that, hey, this ship has no right to fly the German flag. That's about it. Or the International Maritime Organization. There's no basis here that you can just go in on the high seas, take the law into your own hands, and start seizing ships and arresting the crew.
It's very important when the British government is devising a legal basis, they're not using this convention.
No, no, they just made it up. Well,
They just made it up.
UK legislation. UK legislation isn't doesn't have any validity on the high seas. I mean, that's just international waters. That's it. There's no basis there in this UK legislation. And as far as we've talked about this before, but we might as well say it again. The sanctions, unless they're authorized by the UN Security Council, they have no legal validity. You can't start enforcing sanctions At least according to law, you can try, but then you have to live with the consequences.
Yeah, this is supermarket shopping. You put in your basket what you want and what's appealing to you, but you don't take it all on board, okay?
Right,
International law, either you believe in it or you don't,
right,
okay?
right,
You can't pick and choose
right, right.
or make it up.
That's right. But of course, they don't believe in it unless they think that they can use it in a
Right.
debate. So when they think it's to their
Or they can
advantage.
con the
All right.
the public.
Like
Okay.
exactly, exactly. And this is what the media are there for. They're there to calm the public. They're there. They work as the PR agents of governments to calm the public. That well, everything is being done in accordance with international law. The ministers have been sitting there thinking and thinking. Yeah, it's in accordance with international law. So here's the independent Russian shadow fleet ships could be seized by British forces. And then soldiers could target illegal oil tankers in a move to place further economic pressure on Vladimir Putin. Days after the UK supported US operations to seize a Russian flagged tanker in the North Atlantic. So, well,
Here we go. Here
here
we
we go.
go.
Exactly.
We every once in a while I always come up with new names for the podcast. Maybe we should settle on the escalation podcast.
That's right.
Okay.
That's it.
Because this is the escalation George and I have
Right.
been, droning on about. Okay.
Right.
This is the next one.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. That's right. Um, and now, obviously, they think, hey, this was a model. We helped the Americans out. Now the Americans are going to help us out. So,
Mhm.
we'll call on American naval resources, and they'll help us out to seize these tankers. And then officials have reported. So again, they're talking about this Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering Act, which would allow British soldiers to raid and detain oil tankers. They wouldn't allow that. It allows government ministers to claim that it allows British soldiers, but it doesn't allow British soldiers to raid and detain oil tankers. Well, we pass a legislation and suddenly we have the right to seize ships on the high seas. This is
And
really
and
what a neat idea.
all of this is done is to allay any concerns that the British government is doing anything wrong, which would
Yep.
allow Brit. Oh, well, we have a law that allows them to do it. Okay, the whole thing is built. It's a castle of sand. It
It
means
looks
nothing. Okay,
right.
but this is a classic case of manufacturing
That's right.
consensus.
That's right. Exactly. And they did that with the in the case when they were thinking about seizing these Russian frozen assets. So they said, well, the Belgians were obviously very concerned, as you say. They weren't concerned about international law. They were just concerned about the consequences for Belgium. I mean, that's all. If they could do it without suffering any adverse consequences, they would absolutely do it. Um, but even then, they thought, well, we can get around it by we'll call it a loan, and then we'll lend the money to Ukraine, and then Ukraine pays us back, but they'll only have to pay it back if Russia pays Ukraine. So it's all legal. Everything is all legal. You come up with this absolutely ludicrous, convoluted
Well, and
sequence
that's
of
why
events.
they can't say that Ukraine is experiencing difficulties at the front. It's a war of attrition. They can never say that it's in really big trouble because you're trying to convince the public 90 billion euros you're going to give the Ukrainians, no strings attached,
Yep.
and they only have to pay back if Russia loses.
Right.
I mean, it's
Yes.
just beyond comedy.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
That's right. If yeah, that's right.
And
Uh,
then, the taxpayer, you'll pick up the tab. Okay.
that's, that's the part. That's the part that's never mentioned in the news reports when they tell, oh yeah, it's in accordance with international law. Okay, since that's not going to happen, since Russia's not going to just simply lose this war, that means 90 billion. Who's going to pay for that? It's going to be the taxpayer. But the taxpayers they just don't notice because 90 billion is just such a lot of money No one really understands what 90 billion is. And so, oh, we'll just, you just pick up the tab. Well, okay. I mean, we pick up lots of tabs all the time. So we'll just pick up another 90 billion or 300 billion.
And what
Well,
happened in the meantime? What will happen to that 90 billion it's sent to Ukraine?
well, that's gone. That's going to go very quickly.
That will go
I
quick.
mean, so, going to an expensive restaurant, that money, your rent money is going to disappear very quickly. Anyway, here's a, and then we have the Defense Secretary John Healey told MPs the ship had a nefarious history. That's this Marinera, nefarious history, and was part of a Russian-Iranian axis of sanctions evasion, which is fueling terrorism, conflict, and misery from the Middle East to Ukraine.
Oh,
Which,
come on. If, international commerce on the high seas, yeah, there's a lot of nefarious stuff going on there, a
there's a lot
lot
of
of it,
nefarious.
and it's not, it's you just can't pin it on a couple of countries. I mean, it's maritime commerce is in many ways a huge black hole in the global economy because so much stuff is being moved around and reflag and list name and all that. Yeah, uh, uh, it's like Lord of War, okay? The real stuff, okay?
Right,
So, yeah, yeah, nefarious, yeah, but I mean, it's not just the Russians and the Iranians, and then plus, I would say that Iran and Russia don't have the muscle of the U.S. Navy to turn a blind eye. Okay, it's in their interest to play by the rules at the end of the day.
but that's the thing. Now, as we saw, we have the Convention on the Law of the Sea, and they said, well, what are the conditions under which you can board a ship? And say piracy, slave trade. So you got to think about that. Now, if you're sanctions busting, then you can't. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't just simply. There's nothing there. Among the things that the convention lists that says sanctions busting, you can do it. If there's a UN Security Council resolution, but even then, the Security Council resolution has to stipulate that countries can take matters into their own hands. That you can actually go. Let's say you prohibit oil sales to North Korea. Let's say you do that. Okay, you then have to have a provision saying that any country can go ahead, interdict a ship that it suspects is delivering oil to North Korea or whoever. If there's no provision like that, and then then you can't. Doesn't matter. You can report to the UN. Well, hey, there's some sanctions busting going on, but you don't have a right to take matters into your own hands. So with this kind of NATO land, they're so drunk on their own
Yeah.
hubris. Oh, we can just take things matters into our own hands. We can do what we like.
Why? Why can they do it? Because we're the European Union. See,
Yeah,
again, this is it's a false argument. Okay,
right,
it has no value. We can just because. Why can you do it? Just because we can do it. See,
right,
this is the type of intellectual vacuousness that you're always dealing
right.
with because we're the EU.
That's right. Exactly. Yes, we're the international community. Um, he said the seizure was legally justified and that the tanker had been stateless and falsely flying the flag of Guyana when it was first intercepted before changing its name and attempting to adopt the Russian flag. So there we are. We have it here. He is completely wrong. As I said, he's as thick as two planks. And he says wrong. It doesn't matter that it registered. The Russians have said, yeah, it's legally registered to Russia. So it's a Russia. They're flying a Russian flag, and it was legally registered to Russians. So he was not stateless. So what you're saying is completely wrong. You have to pay compensation. I mean, you said we read that. You said you have to pay compensation because what you did and it's even worse. It's just even boarding. When you board, you have to pay compensation, but seizing it and then arresting. Admittedly, they release the people they arrested, but all of that you have to pay a substantial compensation. Uh, and then here it gets even better. The Times of London Special Forces. That's the Special Forces. They're getting the Special Forces trained. Special Forces primed to seize Russian shadow fleet ships. Officials have found legal grounds. They all repeat the same line.
Always, yeah, yeah. It's that's like their what is it? A child? What kind of blanket do they have? Safety blanket? Yeah, that's
Yes, blankie. Yes, that's right.
yeah. They're little blanky.
Yes, right. Officials have found legal grounds for authorizing soldiers to board and detain oil tankers under the Sanctions and Money Laundering Act. British special forces are being lined up to storm Russian shadow fleet vessels.
Oh, doesn't that just make you beam with pride
Exactly.
to storm?
The storm, exactly. The storm that we're going to storm.
When's the last time the UK stormed anything? Okay, jeez.
They're going to storm some rinky-dink boat and arrest
Yeah, yeah.
everybody on board. Elite soldiers trained to rappel. Oh, using that big.
That's a really antiquated word.
I
Okay.
know, but they want to sound as militaristic as possible. Rappel onto ships from helicopters. Oh, so they're going to use helicopters. Yeah, so
And they're going to
like
use helicopter. That's
some
cool.
exactly some Bruce Willis film.
Yeah, exactly.
Helicopters and capture their crews. They capture, these crews who who don't know what the hell they're doing. I mean, they're just a crew.
Yeah,
Preparing the
could
meals.
yeah, could target hundreds of illegal oil tankers after the government identified a new legal basis for the raid. No, they're not going to be doing it to hundreds of oil. They don't have the capacity to do that,
Right.
but they will do it. And very important that helicopters are here because it's all going to be filmed, and that this is part of the propaganda war. Okay, they know they cannot stop this. And if the word nefarious has already been mentioned here, yeah, that's the high seas. That's the realm that you enter into. A captain of a ship, does he know who the owner is? Probably doesn't. Does he care? Probably doesn't.
Right.
Does he care what the ship is carrying? Probably doesn't know. Does he care? Probably doesn't care. Okay, that's the norm, everyone.
Right.
That's the norm.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
And there are laws to protect that because then you have chaos,
Right.
okay? But no, the British have very little capacity. They have zero capacity to go after hundreds of so-called illegal oil tankers. No, they need one or two for show.
Well, that's it. But what you just said is absolutely right because when you said about chaos, because if everybody, if you can invoke the principle that I think it's flying a false flag, and you could just simply board a ship, then essentially you're giving a carte blanche to every state to seize ships on the high seas. They can just simply go ahead. Oh well, we think that it's flying a false flag, so we're going to seize it and arrest the crew. I mean, that's the whole point. That's why they set up the UN
That's
Convention on the Law of the Sea.
why they set
Can't,
it
yeah,
up.
yeah. So you can't do it. That you can't just simply say, "Oh well, they haven't done the proper paperwork, so I can just simply grab any ship that I feel like."
Absolutely. This is to look, how much nefarious trade is there on the high sea? Yeah, we don't know by definition because it's not known, okay? It's not publicly known. And those that are involved in it don't want it to be known. But the vast majority of it is this completely legitimate
Right,
stuff. And
right,
that's why everybody got together and say, this piracy stuff is just driving everybody nuts,
right,
okay?
right,
We can't insure anything. We can't guarantee our supply chains. Everybody,
right,
if you like each other, dislike each other, have old grudges, look, this is a sit down, a sit down.
right,
Don't do it.
right.
That's what it's all about.
That's right. That's right. The insurance thing is also very interesting because they claim that these ships don't have insurance. They do have insurance. They just haven't got insurance from the big Western oil companies,
Exactly,
Western insurance companies.
because these countries are sanctioned against using it,
That's right.
okay?
Right. Anyway, UK officials believe they have found grounds for authorizing soldiers, blah, blah. And then under maritime law, each vessel must be registered to a specific country or territory and display its flag. This allows it to travel in international waters and offers it certain protections, while ships that are deemed stateless could be targets for seizure. No, they are not. No, they are not targets for seizure. It says, when we read the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, they could be a target for boarding, and then you can check the paperwork, and that's it. They use words very precisely when they create these conventions. They said boarding, not seizure. because it makes a huge difference. Any future raids on Russian ships involving British special forces would probably be a joint operation involving Royal Navy warships, Royal Air Force, spy planes, and possible collaboration with Nordic NATO allies. Um, and then it says to seize a vessel.
Escalation. This is the next layer of escalation.
That's right. That's right. To seize a vessel, the UK needs to establish the ship is legally stateless. This could mean that it's not legitimately registered in any country, is flying a false flag, or has been disavowed by the country under whose flag it is sailing. But see, I mean, whenever they write this, a single reporter actually go and look at what the UN Convention, which is the operating law on the high seas, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. When you say all this, you just simply repeat it. You repeat what John Healey says to you, and then you say, "Oh yeah, that's what that's what international law that allows the seizure of ships." No, it does not. But that's really the thing, with what we call journalism. This is just simply, the megaphone for governments who are in the business of lying.
If you look at the origins of what we understand to be journalism, it's interesting. It has a lot to do with this topic.
Mm.
It is going back centuries now, where gazettes were privately, not by the government, but by private people that after the printing press had been invented, is that when a ship will leave, when it will arrive, the ship is going to be, because all of the artisans and guilds, they needed to know this
Right,
information. Okay.
right.
And it's really the reason why I'm thinking about it is that here is the media bolstering a government position
Right.
when one of the foundations of journalism was to protect the interests of civil society.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Exactly. So the protection of the rights of commerce, the
The rights
commerce
of it's
among nations. Yeah, that's right.
never, at least in the Western tradition, never underestimate how important that
Right.
is.
Yeah. And then Politico, UK offers to work with Europe on Putin shadow fleet seizures. I always love it, they always personalize this. Oh, it's Putin's own personal shadow fleet.
Yeah, he has a shadow fleet room, and he's looking at all the little
Exactly.
ships.
Well, nice. We got a nice shadow fleet here. And then here's we stand ready to work with allies on stronger enforcement around the shadow fleet. UK Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper
I,
said,
I only found out today that that's who the foreign minister is.
yes, because she only got that job quite recently. She was I think she was the Home Secretary up until quite recently. So
Well, yeah,
yes, yeah.
her name popped up in a different context for me today. Is that she's basically throwing shade at Macron and at Maloney. Maybe it's about and Mertz. Maybe it's time we talk to the Russians, okay? And she's the firewall. No, we won't, okay? She's a very ugly woman. I'm
He's
sorry.
very young. It's very, very, very true.
This is a private podcast. I'll say
No,
whatever.
that's right. That she was she
I
her,
mean, but ugly women when they're mean, it's like an what's the term? It's a multiplier effect.
That's right. But her name used to be Yvette Bowles because she was married to Ed Bowles, who was who used to be in the Labour government. He was in the Tony Blair government. So that was used to be her name, Yvette Bowles. Now she's Yvette Cooper, which sounds a little more dignified, shall we say. Anyway, UK is ready to work with its European allies to intercept vessels in Russia's shadow fleet. And so Yvette Cooper said the Britain is prepared to work in enforcement with other countries and other allies against ships suspected of carrying sanctioned oil or damaging undersea infrastructure. So this is a new one. This is the one that they keep talking about, damaging undersea infrastructure, even though they've not proven one case when that any ship deliberately set out to damage undersea infrastructure, if they even damaged it at all, but that this was done with deliberate intent. And even then, there's no basis under the convention that you can just seize a ship because they're damaging infrastructure.
Yeah, yeah.
And here's officials believe UK has identified a legal basis. It's all
Again, here we
voice. We
go.
identified
We
a legal basis.
we'd been looking for it for weeks and weeks. Okay, it was a lot of work. We had a
A
lot of
lot of
inputs
we,
here.
we
A lot of those books you see in TV serials where they have, the legal books behind you on the
that's right.
bookcase.
That's right.
That we poured through them. We
That's right.
poured through them. Okay.
That's right.
When you're looking for a legal basis, you know you're going in a bad
You're
place.
absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Because if it's legal, then it should be fairly obvious that it's
Yeah,
illegal. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
That's why it's a law, George. It's usually very obvious.
Exactly.
That's why we have laws.
That's right. That's exactly it. It has to be very simple. I think Alan Dershowitz, I think he talks about, I think Thomas Jefferson said something like, I have to understand it while I'm running. I don't know if he actually said that, but that's what Dershowitz quotes Jefferson as saying. The law has to be very straightforward. I can understand it while I'm running. And so that's the point. If you have to start rummaging around a piece of legislation, nobody even remembers. I mean, the
Well,
British pass one law after another from 2018 and say, oh, that provides us with some kind of a justification, then you're not really doing anything in accordance with the law.
yeah, let's go back to that sexed up uh, dossier of the Blair
Oh,
government looking to identify a legal basis for the Iraq War. See, how did that end? You go
that
in a
did not end
bad
well. Oh,
place.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. Yes. That was just in case people have forgotten because that was already now more than 20 years ago. That was Tony Blair claiming that Saddam Hussein was very close to having nuclear weapons, and so that was basis of this dossier. But the contents of the dossier was nonsensical. It was some students' unpublished dissertation, and they put it in as if this is something all factually based, and then of course. That led to litigation because a reporter says they sexed up the dossier, and Blair then sued, and so it went on. But you're absolutely right. That whole thing was just an embarrassment, and everyone's already forgotten about
Yeah,
the
well,
fake
well,
dossier.
look at the Maduro indictment, another embarrassment. Okay.
Exactly. She also did not rule out using oil. And here now, this is the next part. She also did not use out using oil from seized vessels to fund the Ukrainian war effort. Oh, gotta get tankers. We gotta grab. Now that's of course very interesting because this is oil that somebody has paid for. So, I mean,
It's
let's say
coming.
you're delivering it to a country. The country has actually paid for this oil. So you're stealing it from somebody else. You're not even stealing it from the country that the tanker is registered to. You're stealing it from somebody who's purchased the oil.
And on top of it, okay, let's say, they seize and capture an oil tanker. So the British military they have enough headroom to understand what kind of oil they have. So where are you going to? What refinery should we send this? Do
Right.
we have a refinery like this in the UK? Maybe we can send it to another country, and other countries say, well, we don't really want it because somebody else has purchased it. Okay, so we don't want to get into litigation. We want to take stolen goods.
That's
Okay,
that's a very good point. Yeah.
because there are laws about that.
No, you're
Okay,
absolutely
I
right.
mean, again, this is this bravado.
Right.
We will seize the oil and we'll use it proceeds to. Do you know how hard that's going to be? Do you know how complicated the international oil sector is? It is extremely complicated.
Right.
Oil isn't just like water.
No, but you're absolutely right. Because it's stolen oil. It's stolen. Somebody's paid for it, so it's stolen. You can't then pass it on to someone else who says, "Hey, this is stolen goods." If you're receiving stolen goods and knowingly receiving stolen goods, then you're liable to be prosecuted. I mean, so who's going to want this the years and years of litigation? So yeah, but that says, but caution that the prospect was of a different order to using frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine. Oh, so
How?
that idea hit a wall in discussions between EU countries in December. So we've got another wizard idea. Hey, how are we going to send the money to Ukraine? Oh, we got a great idea. Let's
Yeah, we're
steal
gonna
all this
shake
oil.
we're gonna shake down oil tanker. This is desperate. This is the level of desperation is difficult to
Right.
grasp.
That's right. Yeah.
So we're flat broke. We're too afraid to steal Russian sovereign assets because of what the fallout would be. So maybe we could steal a few tankers.
Yes. That's
What wizard came up with this one?
The foreign secretary said, as you know, we've all had sorts of discussions in the past about different Russian sovereign asset. That's a different set of circumstances. So we take the approach that it always has to be done within an international legal framework and on a case by case basis. What international legal framework? You don't have an international legal framework. You're getting outside any kind of framework. You just made stuff up because what Ursula von der Leyen said. I mean, if you want a legal framework, very easy. You go to a court and get a legal opinion. That's what the International Court of Justice is there for. You want a legal opinion, they'll provide you with a legal opinion. Is it legal to seize a country's sovereign assets? What does international law say about that? That the ICJ would say, no, it is not legal. It is strictly illegal. That's it. So, of course, that's why they didn't go to the ICJ to get a legal opinion.
Yeah, but if a state does it, and particularly my state, it should be legal, right? No, it's
That's right.
still not legal. Sorry.
Exactly. On a case by case basis. And then here's the Times, of course, repeat this. Oh, UK could use oil from shadow fleet to fund Ukraine war effort. Plans to use oil seized from tankers in the fight against Putin. Fight against Putin. The British journalism is among the worst in the world. It always has been. But here is the Times, which I guess, I don't know, decades ago, something not in my lifetime, but used to have a reputation. It's long disappeared, that reputation of the Times. But this is your article. Plans to use oil seized from tankers in the fight against Putin. It's a fight against Putin. What fight against Putin? What are you even talking about? The fight against Putin would have a double impact on the Russian war machine. So we've now moved from seizing these tankers. We're not even worried. We've got the legal basis for that. So we're now onto what's the legal basis for using the oil? So we're now going to find the next legal basis. I mean, they're getting very, very excited. We sorted that out. We've got a legal basis for that. Now let's have the legal basis for stealing oil from somebody
Yeah,
else,
well,
and then passing the proceeds on to Ukraine.
it's very reminiscent of that at the beginning of this year, the coalition of the willing meeting in Paris, and they all come out ebullient and self-satisfied. We've come up with a plan. Well, now you've come up with an imaginary plan with your imaginary friends with imaginary international law, and they're all backslapping each other. But once you open up the door and go out to the street, the cold air hits you in the face, and it's just like, was that just a dream? Did we just have a sleepover and everyone was happy? And that's exactly what this is.
That's right. Yes, exactly. Britain is examining plans to use any oil seized from Russian shadow fleet vessels to fund the Ukraine war effort. Well, they're examining the
Okay,
plans.
again, this is just a fool's errand, as I said earlier. Okay, you have the oil. Whose oil is it? Who's going to refine it? What money is going, what bank is going to allow that into their
No,
coffers? I mean, this is a very suspect origin here. And what did the government have to do this in the first place? Nobody's going to touch this.
no one's going.
Nobody.
No one's going to touch it. For exactly the reasons we're saying, somebody has paid for it, so it belongs to the person who was the state that's paid for this oil. So if you seize it and then decide that you're going to just make use of it, that means you're using stolen goods. You're absolutely obviously you can't be criminally prosecuted because you're a state, but legal there will absolutely be legal action. And as you say, what bank is going to handle this? What company is going to handle this? Hey, we're going to have years and years of litigation ahead of us. Of course, no one's going to touch this. Under options being discussed, the UK would not only stop funds flowing to Russia's war machine, but also divert money raised from sanctioned oil to Ukraine. Whether such a plan is feasible is unclear.
At
Yeah.
least they did
So you're right. It's like the coalition of the willing. Whether such a plan for the coalition of the willing is feasible is unclear. You're going to send
but it's a
troops.
plan. It's a plan.
It's a plan, but the thing about plans, anyone can put forward a plan, however idiotic. Um, the difficult part is to make a plan feasible. That's really where a plan actually becomes a plan. Just an idiotic plan is just an idiotic idea. That's easy to do. Anyone can have an idiotic idea. And then here, two
Okay.
shadow fleet vessels on well, both crude oil tankers are flying false flags of Cameroon and Zimbabwe, respectively, making them possible targets for UK special forces and so on. On what basis are they flying false flags? They just report this. How do you know? You've checked with Cameroon? Did you put in a call to the government of Cameroon and say, are they flying your flag falsely? They just say this, this falsely. The Zimbabwe, you checked with Zimbabwe that this is a false flag, and so on. Anyway, that's the state of play, and I think we've established that this is yet another one of these brilliant ideas that the British, the British, who are always the most belligerent state, pretty much in the world, is probably the most belligerent, the least capable at the moment of mounting any kind of a serious military campaign. Um, and so they've now got, okay, well, we've got a legal basis for seizing ships, arresting people, and now we've even got a legal basis for
Well,
selling the oil. Wow.
yeah, but see, but what they're doing is their legal pitch is just it doesn't pass the laugh test. Okay, why are they doing this? Because Trump is doing it, and they think that that gives them a free pass, and it will it will it's almost as if it's a gift, the currying favor with Trump. See, you seize these ships. We're doing it too for the cause. The problem is with them that the Europeans, they don't understand what Trump's cause is. It's very difficult to determine that, okay? The
Right.
Europeans are just too dim-witted.
Right.
So this is just, they're mimicking what Trump is doing. Trump is doing it for very different reasons.
Yeah.
It's about his agenda with with the Western Hemisphere.
Right.
But I mean, if will the British be interdicting American ships going to Greenland?
No. 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 No.
Because
No.
they
No.
could be involved in nefarious and aggressive, have an aggressive agenda. I mean, it's just so absurd. I don't know. Maybe I'm just kind of remembering badly, but I remember a lot more sophistication from these people 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah. No. I think that's right. And they used to be that. But you're right. With the British, you always have to grasp this essential characteristic of theirs. They're always trying to keep in with the Americans. They're
Yes.
always trying to imitate the Americans. They're always trying to do whatever the Americans are doing. And it was the same like with the Black Lives Matter. It was the British who embraced this.
Yeah.
And nothing whatever to do with Britain, but they kind of embraced the whole issue of Black Lives Matter. They're taking the knee and all the rest, just because that's what the Americans were doing. So I think you're absolutely right. They said, "Hey, this is what Trump is doing, so let's do
Then it's
this.
okay because we have cover.
We have cover exactly. That's the
Well,
idea.
but see, for better or worse, and I would probably err on the side of worse, a country like the United States is powerful enough to disregard international law. The more powerful you are, the more you're able to brush that aside because you're powerful.
Yeah,
The UK is not powerful, okay?
you're absolutely right, and that's where the problem arises. That if they do this kind of unilaterally, then they're running a serious risk. I mean, if you haven't got the backstop, as Keir Starmer will put it. You don't have the backstop from the Americans. You are you are up against it because then it's just you facing up to great powers, and not a good idea. Not a good idea if you don't have anyone in your corner. So, you know, but it's part of this. I think we've said before that this is part of the escalation that you know they keep wanting to provoke some kind of a crisis, some serious shooting incident or whatever. I mean, that
I'm
goes
waiting.
together with the attempt to which they're talking about seizing Kaliningrad. You know, they're doing all sorts of different things in order to provoke some kind of a crisis.
And that's what on this podcast we have been waiting for. Okay. Like I said, the UK is not going to intercept and seize every single ship. Like they don't have nearly the capacity.
Right.
Okay. And one or two will be made an example of them stemming the tide of the nefarious trade or whatever they want to call it. Okay. There's going to be a couple of test cases, one in the North Atlantic, one in the Baltic. Okay, and that's going to be their casus belli. Okay, that's what they're going to do. Okay, and so I'm just waiting for that. They're waiting to choreograph something.
Yeah. What happens if the Russians seize a UK ship?
Well, there you have it, George. There you have it. And you know what? It's going to happen.
Yeah. I
It's
tend to
going
think that
to
that's going
happen.
to happen. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, look, for those of you that don't know, I can't impress upon you enough. We have the laws of wars and, the Westphalian settlement and all these things are kind of important. But that's not where the money is. The money is with commerce, okay? And that's why this is way beyond red lines. Okay, countries that were belligerent, hated each other, they still traded. Okay, because there are interests in all countries that want the freedom to trade without encumbrances, and this is going way over the line,
Yep.
and it is intolerable. It's intolerable, and
Exactly.
and so I think we'll see it first in the Baltic.
Yeah.
It's much closer to home, and then you have countries are going to be far more intimidated real fast. Okay, the Chihuahuas, Sweden, you
Yep.
know, they had capacity for reconnaissance. That's what was their shadow role. The Sweden and Finland, the shadow role that they played during the Cold War. They did recon for
Yep.
NATO and the United States. These people, they're not up to the task,
Yep.
okay? And all you're going to need is a couple of Russian jets flying really low and over their bow to say, get away, move away. Now, I don't know how the British are going to react to that. They'll probably do it in some, they choreograph a situation that is so illegal, and then at the last second, see, they're picking on us,
Yep.
okay?
Yep.
And this is what they're going to do.
No, I agree. I think
I think it's inevitable because they're grasping and they need a visual. They don't need an idea. Because when you try to convince people about the Russian shadow fleet and blah blah, and there's sabotage underwater, you don't see it. You can't visualize it. It's something you can't. It's not tangible. A ship, men on board, probably with dark skin, and they have, and they just like with Trump and the tattoos. It was a pirate flag. Did you see it? It's a pirate flag. It's probably not a pirate flag. That's what I'm waiting for,
right.
because
No, I think that
the interest in this is waning. Is people get poorer and more distressed. They need this. It's called bread and circuses, everyone.
I agree. I think it's coming, and in particular, given how um, unpopular the Starmer government is, I mean, it's just an embarrassment. I mean, the poll numbers, you know, what do unimaginative governments do in those circumstances? Because Starmer is a very unimaginative person. He's not the brightest
He
bulb.
looks good in a bikini, though. Have you noticed?
Yes.
He's really upset about that.
Yes, he's very upset about that, which
A
again shows
public figure is
his own lack
the
of
prime
imagination.
minister. is
What?
upset that somebody is, trolling him, but, using AI, putting him in a bikini. That's part of being in public life. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
Okay. I was astounded that he was so upset about it. I mean, it happens all of the time.
That's
Are
right.
you so sensitive?
He's very sensitive, and you see, he's a former prosecutor. He was the top prosecutor in the UK, and that's his mentality. His mentality is to put people on trial. His mentality is to bring criminal charges against people. He's not really a politician. He's not, he doesn't understand politics. He doesn't
He's a
understand
bad politician.
that's why he's a bad politician. He thinks like a prosecutor, and so well, let's ban it. Let's arrest these people. Let's shove them in prison. Let's pass a new law to enable us to shove more people in prison. That's his mentality. And then he's surprised why he's so unpopular because people don't really want a chief prosecutor as their prime minister. So that's why, on a bikini. Well, that's against the law.
No, it's
We need to
not.
prosecute.
It's called trolling you, mocking you. That's all it is. I mean, grow up, man. Get a backbone.
Yeah,
Grow a spine.
yeah, yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
know.
so this is so they're all wrapping it up into around international law where they don't have a leg to
No,
stand on.
none at all. And that's why it's, just going back to what we were saying at the beginning, it makes their claim that somehow um, what Trump is doing with Denmark and Greenland sounds so false. I mean, of course, it already sounded false to us, but this only makes it doubly so. Is that you don't really care about international law. You never have cared about international law. Stop pretending and just just knock it off. You know, as I was saying, you just accept things. Oh, it's international law. No,
Trump is trying to steal
no,
Greenland.
stealing,
You were
stealing.
trying to steal Russian sovereign assets. I mean, so
Oh,
you're better?
that's right. We're stealing. That's right. That's right.
You're better?
Yeah.
It's all turning into a endless cul-de-sac,
Yeah.
okay? You abuse international law and becomes useless, okay? And you will rue the day for
Right.
doing this,
That's
okay?
right.
The maritime laws, people stuck to it because it worked.
That's right.
It worked,
That's
okay?
right.
All these other conventions, about human rights and all of this, it's very
Right.
thin gruel if you really think about it,
Yep.
okay? Because countries violate these things all the time and you think, oh, that's unfortunate. But when you come to commerce, you don't think of the word unfortunate,
That's
George.
that's right. That's right. That's always been the basis of if we're going to have international law. That was always the basis, which is the freedom of navigation. That was always at the core of international law, just like the immunity of diplomats. That these are at
Hey,
the core. And when you start messing with that, then you're really in something serious. But things like waging war and everything else, that's very questionable. You can say it's against international law, but really, that's not the case. But that freedom of navigation, the immunity of diplomats, that lies at the core of it. And if you start messing around with that, in both cases, they've done that. Americans did that with diplomatic property, and now you're going around seizing ships on the high seas.
now let
No,
me let me so to close this out. So, has Russia and China seized diplomatic compounds from foreign countries? No. Has Russia and China been hijacking ships on the high seas? No. But we do know who does.
exactly, exactly. That's
All
right.
right, everybody. This is part of our Friday wrap. This is a Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on locals. So go to thegaggle.locals.com. I'm not going to use the operative word right now because they're asleep. I don't want to stir them, but it kind of looks like.
That's right. Yeah. Well, the thing is, they're sleeping because they feel we've been working really hard. We're doing all this work. We deserve our rest, and we deserve to be remunerated. And that's their attitude. So it's if they were up, they would say, yeah, remuneration. stuff the $100 bills
Ching,
in
ching,
there.
ching, ching, ching,
Exactly.
ching.
That's a remuneration. We're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve the technology, and at least we'll be able to keep the dogs quiet for a little while. It's very, very hard. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon.